everyone. This is your host, Eric Loya of Vets Helping Vets, episode number 2. With me, I have today a very close friend of mine, a co-worker, Coast Guard vet. Actually was in the Army and the Air Force. So he's very knowledgeable, by the name of Cole Caswell. And we're going to be talking about the VA system, how a lot of us have issues with the VA, don't know how to do a VA claim or get stuck in the rut, or go with other entities like the BFW, the DAV, AMVETS, and at the end of the day, we are responsible for our claims or benefits. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Cole Caswell. Cole, introduce yourself to our millions of listeners out there.
You know what? I'm so excited to be the second interviewee of this show, and I think it's really important. It's bringing vets together, and it's just something I think that's very important. I am 44 years old, from San Diego, California. Family man. I got 2 kids, a dog, a wife. Was in the Coast Guard for 10 years. I joined in 1999. Prior to that, so let me start from the beginning. I actually joined the Air Force at 18 years old back in 1991. I spent 1 glorious year in the Air Force. I was kicked out after a year.
Were you kicked out, or were you?
No, I was.
Or just like a mutual separation.
I was straight up kicked out.
You just couldn't handle the
pressure.
military life.
I couldn't handle the luxuries of the Air Force. No, I joined the Air Force to become a cop. My dad was a cop. I wanted to do what my dad did. I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. Joined the Air Force, went through boot camp. My dad was so proud. Got through boot camp, went to A school, and when they handed out, actually at the end of boot camp, they said, hey, okay, we're going to hand out our jobs. They got to me and they said, Caswell, and I said, yes. And they said, maintenance scheduler. And I said, that doesn't sound like cop. I said, did he say cop? And the guy said, no, I think maintenance scheduling. So what it turned out to be was I was going to be in charge of scheduling the maintenance for all the lawnmowers and all the maintenance equipment on base.
I think they call them operations specialists, right?
Yeah. And so I went to school for it, and I talked to my instructor, and I said, hey, this isn't what I joined for. This was my first experience with the military.
Classic, and I think everybody goes through that, right?
Everybody goes through that.
They tell you,
and
this is what you're going to do, and then at the end of the day, they give you another job.
Yeah, and the recruiters are like, they'll tell you exactly what they want you to hear. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of good recruiters out there, but mine said, oh, don't worry, nobody wants to be a cop. So you'll get it. Don't even worry about it. I go to my A school in Illinois, Chanute Air Force Base, Illinois. And I talked to my instructor, and I say, hey, this is not what I joined for. And he says, well, just at the end of the 4 years, put in a request for a cop, and you could become a cop. And I said, I don't want to wait 4 years. He says, well, there is another avenue. I said, what is it? Just fail all your tests in A school. And they're going to realize you're so dumb that they're going to give you a different job. You can become a cop. And that's not a dig on any cops out there. It's not that the cop rate is, they're dumb or anything. He just said, hey, this is an avenue to get a switch in a job. So I did. But instead of offering me another job, they offered me a plane ticket home with a dishonorable discharge. And my dad picked me up from the airport, and it was horrific. He wouldn't even talk to me on the way home. It was tough. That was my first experience with the military. Yeah, it was.
Did you apply to get dishonorable other than honorable? Or?
No, they kicked me out, and they said you are going home. And they made me sign a piece of paper saying you will never join the military service again, any military. And I was 18. I just wanted to go home. At that point, I was just like, hey, I'm done.
So you were like,
I was stupid.
Done with the military.
Not thinking correctly. Now, in hindsight, I should have stayed in. I'd have been retired by now. But I signed it, and I was never able to join the military again.
So let's fast forward. How did you...
Fast forward about 6-7 years, and, worked oddball jobs, And the true story behind it was, it digged at me. It digged at me over the years. We'd go to football games. I'd see Super Bowls, and the national anthem would play. And I always look at my dad, and I'm like, man, I let my dad down, and I let myself down. And I was talking to other vets, and they did their time. They did their service, and they would ask me about mine, and I would lie about mine. And be like, yeah, I did 4 years in the Air Force. But deep down, I was like, I only did a year, and I got kicked out. So I went to a recruiter, and I joined the Army National Guard. And so turns out you can have a dishonorable discharge and get in the Army National Guard. So I think I left off where I got out of the Air Force, and I fast forwarded a few years to joining the Army National Guard.
Correct.
I wanted to go to college, and somebody said, hey, you should join the reserves, and you can get college money. And I said, great, what should I join? first thing I looked up was Army National Guard because California's got a huge Army National Guard. So I called them up, made an appointment, and before you know it, they signed me up. Even with a dishonorable discharge, I enlisted in the Army National Guard for 6 years.
So did they know about your dishonorable discharge?
Yes.
And
they said, not a problem.
Not a problem.
Not a problem.
So
now,
for veterans out there that might gotten a dishonorable discharge for whatever reason, and are still wanting to join again, they have that.
They have that avenue.
That avenue, or they made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes.
Oh yeah.
And you're 18.
Yeah.
You didn't know what you wanted.
Yep.
And this happens to you, and then you're like, I want to start all over again. This is what I want.
Yeah.
The Army National Guard or any National Guard.
Yeah.
Except
Air National Guard
with a dishonorable discharge. So there is hope for somebody out there that
there is. Yeah.
Is contemplating, man, I screwed up.
Yeah.
Do I have a second chance?
Do I have a second chance?
You do.
You get a dishonorable discharge. Yes. I mean, it's a hit to the conscience. I mean, it hit me. And it hit my dad even worse. My dad was this proud. I mean, he was in the Air Force, and he was so proud when I joined. So when I got kicked out and he picked me up from the airport, it was a look of disgust on his face. And my dad and I are tight. That's what hurt me over the years. So I joined the Army National Guard, and it was a tank division. I actually drove tanks out at Fort Irwin. And when they offered me a job, they said, do you want to be a cook, a mechanic, or a tank driver? I said, well, that's a no-brainer. I'm going to be a tank driver. I can't cook. I didn't take auto shop in high school. I'll drive a tank. And that's what I did.
So how long were you in the Guard
I was in the National Guard for 3 years.
Nice.
And, it was good. It kind of filled the gap that I had from, feeling bad about getting kicked out of the Air Force. But over the years, it wasn't enough for me. I did my 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, and I just still felt like
You wanted to go full-time?
I wanted to go full-time. I wanted to be one of those vets that said, hey, I did it. I did 4 years, and I did my time. So being in the reserves is an awesome opportunity, but I wanted to go back to full-time. Now, I didn't want to go full-time Army, per se. I worked at FedEx at the time with my dad, and I remember being down at the San Diego airport working at FedEx at the ramp loading trucks, and we had a 5-minute break where there was nothing going on. And I remember like it was yesterday, I see a Coast Guard helicopter fly over, and there's a Coast Guard base right down next to the airport. And I looked at my dad and I said, damn, that would have been cool, And I don't know anything about the Coast Guard, but it looks pretty cool. And my dad said, yeah, maybe you should look into it. And I said, I can't. I got a dishonorable discharge. And he says, well, you never know. Talk to a recruiter. So that next day, called up a recruiter, made an appointment, went in, and immediately they opened up my file and they saw the reentry code that I got from the Air Force. And the recruiter said, absolutely not. He says, there's nothing I can do for you. I hate to tell you this. I know you want to join full time. You're not going to get in. He said, whatever you did in the Air Force, I remember it was RE1. I got a reentry code of RE1, and it's like probably the worst you can get. And I signed a paper. He saw the paper I signed not to join anymore. So that hit me hard. And I went home, and my dad asked me what happened. I said, I can't join. I can't do it. A couple days later, I started I have a hard time taking no for an answer. That's one big thing that my dad has instilled in me. And so I started thinking of ways on my own, like how can I turn this around? How can I get past that RE1 code that wasn't allowing me to go in? And I was desperate, so I lived in San Marcos, California, and I went to the mayor's office. I went and talked. I sat down. I said, hey, I want to talk to the mayor. And they said, for what? And I said, I want to ask him if he could write me a letter of recommendation. And the guy said, okay, well, I'll sign you up for an appointment. And so I showed up, and there was the mayor. And he had a little scribe next to him, and he said, what's going on? And I told him my whole my story. He said, I don't know what this is going to do for you. He says, but you sound like a guy that wants to serve his country. You sound like you wanted to be proud again. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to write you a letter. Again, I don't know how far it's going to go. And he did just that. He wrote me the letter.
Public servants.
Yeah.
They work for us. Yep. We vote for them. They can help you out, right?
I am living proof that they can help me out. I sat down with this guy. I sat down with the mayor, and he said, you know what? I'm going to write you this letter. I think you're a stand-up guy. You're wanting to serve your country. I could see that, this has affected you, and you want to serve your country. So he wrote me a letter. I took that letter, and I took it straight down to the Coast Guard recruiter, and I said, "Hey, can this do anything for me?" And the recruiter, I remember him laughing. He says, "Oh my God, I've never seen somebody go talk to the mayor and get this letter." He says, "I have to send this up. I want to see what happens." He says, "Personally, I don't think anything's going to happen." He says, "It's probably going to get shut down." A week went by, and I get a phone call from the recruiter. He said, "When do you want to go to boot camp?" And I was in my late 20s. I was in my mid to late 20s. I was 26 going to boot camp. And I was like, oh my God, and this is real. I was like, holy, I'm back in. I'm going to get back in, but I have to go back to boot camp in my late 20s. That was hard for me.
Wow.
But it was great. And I quit my job at FedEx. The National Guard at the time let me out of my contract. I was only 3 years into my contract. You can get out of a contract in the reserves if you go active duty. You can't just say, "Hey, I want out, and I'm just going to get out." Then you're going to get another dishonorable.
Right.
Right. There are ways to get out, but you're going to just get another dishonorable. If you go active duty service, they'll let you out. So I went to my command and I said, "Hey, I want to go active duty." Now, of course, I heard, they made fun of me because I was, going to go in the Coast Guard. But they said okay, and they signed it, and before you know it, I was off on my way to boot camp. I remember showing up to the airport. I can't remember, it was in New Jersey, and I remember all the guys that all the other 18-year-olds, not other 18-year-olds, but the 18-year-olds that were there going to boot camp. I was walking up, and they said, "Oh, here comes the command, the drill instructor." Yeah, and I was like, "No, I'm with you guys. I'm one of you guys." And in boot camp, they were getting letters from their family. I was getting my bills. I got my car payment in boot camp and stuff like that. So, but no. And fast forward, then I did 10 years active duty in the Coast Guard. Been all over the world. But real quick. So when I graduated Coast Guard boot camp, now I knew I wasn't. I don't care what job they were going to give me. I was staying in. That was my goal. I'm 4 years in. And I remember my dad going to my boot camp, and it was like a weight had lifted off my chest. Years of I just saw him in the stands, and I was just like, damn.
I mean, my dad's proud.
Totally. And it was just like, I don't care if this next 4 years sucks. It was worth it just for that. But it was more than that. I did my time, and now I fit in that category of, vets that did their time, and I'm proud to say it now. And I'm still into this day. I've been in 10 years active duty. I got 13 years as a reservist, and, I got my retirement letter 3 years ago.
And you're a chief in the...
I'm a chief in the United States Coast Guard. I do deployments probably every 2 to 3 years, just because I love the Coast Guard. But I got my retirement letter, and they said, "Hey, do you want to retire?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I want to do my time. I love it."
That's awesome.
I love it.
And now you work here in the fire department?
I work here at the fire department. And I got into the fire department through a connection with the Coast Guard. So I was active duty Coast Guard in Virginia, and my brother, who works for FedEx, the whole family worked for FedEx. I talked about, work for the fire department. I thought it'd be so cool. And my brother, who worked for FedEx, delivered on North Island Naval Base. And he says, "Hey, man, you should have looked into the fire department. I see these guys driving around in the fire department, the fire trucks. I think they're military. I don't know. Or I think they're civilians, I mean." And so I said, "Stop in and talk to somebody." So he did just that. And turns out there was a coastie that, got out of the Coast Guard and got hired onto the fire department. And I said, "Let me talk to that guy." And I got on the phone with him, and he plugged me into the right avenues. And eventually got to talk to the right people, and because of that connection that I had in the Coast Guard and that vet helping another vet out, I got hired on through the Fed Fire.
So, moral of the story: never burn your bridges.
Never burn your bridges, and just know that that's a huge reason why I wanted to get back in the military. There's, you meet friends throughout your life, and childhood friends, and maybe sometimes you keep in touch with them. But I noticed that one thing is you always keep in touch with the people that you served with. Like, maybe it's because you go through a hard time. You go through the deployments, you go through boot camp. But I still talk to tons of my old friends that I was in the service with.
And they're always there to help each other out.
They are.
Cool, Colt. So now you're in the fire department.
Yep. Been here almost 8 years.
Yeah.
Got in through a vet, helping a vet.
Helping you out.
Yep.
And now we're in the fire department.
Yep.
And 90% of our fire department is veterans.
It's all vets, yeah.
And now comes the main reason why I brought you in, because you are our department's veteran affairs guru.
Yeah.
You fought with the VA for years.
Yeah.
And you've been successful at it. and you help us out.